The year began with a victory lap.
Republicans said they would never agree to raise tax rates on the wealthiest Americans. Obviously, the agreement would raise them permanently.
It's ending in frustration and apologies.
Nobody's more frustrated than I am.
What's behind the Obama breakdown?
There's no question we can fix this.
The stories you haven't heard.
You girls are ready to opt out of Obamacare, right?
This hour, Fox News reporting behind the Obama breakdown. From Washington, D.C., here's Brett Baier.
Who'd have thunk it? A tech-savvy Team Obama struggling to get a website up and running. Conservatives going for defense cuts, confounding Democrats. Washington wondering if the progressives' capstone achievement may be their undoing. A freshman senator leading his party down a road its senior statesman would rather not go. We're going to try to make sense of the last 12 months. We start with another paradox of sorts. A cadre of young political activists mobilizing against the president's signature legislation. November 10th, 2013, the month after the Obamacare exchanges opened for business. Thousands of University of Miami and Virginia Tech fans party outside Sun Life Stadium. But this is more than a pregame tailgate bash. It sounds a lot like a call to civil disobedience.
So literally hundreds of people are going to sign up to opt out today, right? Hopefully. That's right. All right.
Though 29-year-old Evan Feinberg, the president of Generation Opportunity, would deny that.
You've been traveling the country essentially telling people, young people, to ignore the law.
No, not at all.
Well, come on, Evan. We have cameras following you around and you tell young people to opt out.
Well, no doubt we're actually telling young people to opt out.
You girls are ready to opt out of Obamacare, right? You're ready to opt out of Obamacare, right? All right.
Because that's the best possible decision about their health care. They shouldn't pay 3 times as much for their insurance, not to get better health care for themselves, but to pay for an older, sicker generation's health care benefits.
Feinberg is talking about the fact that for Obamacare to work, young, healthy people must pay into the system, but not make many claims on it. That way, their premiums will subsidize older, sicker people who, statistically speaking, will use a lot more health care services. On this day, and this venue at least, the word seemed to be getting out.
With Obamacare, I'm going to have to pay 3-4 times more money in health insurance for premiums or deductibles, and I think that's ridiculous.
Would you be interested in signing our petition?
You're basically a community organizer, aren't you?
In a lot of ways, yes. We are stealing some tactics from the left.
Opt out! Opt out!
We're trying to get them motivated and involved in ways that will make a difference.
The Obamacare scam relies on these young people being patsies. They are not. They will not sign up for this bad deal, and that's why this law is going to fail.
Do you want this law to fail?
Our goal with this campaign is not to undermine the law.
But Evan, by doing what you're doing, you are undermining the law. If you succeed, the law does fail.
Well, that's the sign of a really, really terrible bad law.
Or at least a law that's disappointed a lot of Americans for a number of reasons.
Nobody's more frustrated by that than I am.
Breaking tonight, a new health care bombshell.
This will be a story of an epic collapse.
Called the biggest political lie of the year.
We're seeing this thing seemingly crumbling.
Millions of canceled policies, sticker shock, and of course, the malfunctioning website. It all adds up to the most amazing spectacle of mayhem and meltdown anyone has seen in politics since Watergate, says Wall Street Journal columnist Dan Henninger.
I don't think it's just Obamacare that's failing here. I think it's the underlying idea that the Democrats have promised the American people in the entire post-war period. Government can provide good things on an almost limitless basis. And that is being shown with this act to no longer be true.
Columnist Dan Henninger wrote that 2013 will be remembered as the year when the whole progressive ideal fell apart. You agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that.
Freshman Congressman John Delaney, a Maryland Democrat, acknowledges Obamacare's rough start, but insists suggestions that progressivism may be dead are greatly exaggerated.
The progressive movement is about immigration reform. The progressive movement is about making investment in our kids so they can compete in a global and technology-enabled world. The progressive movement is about adjusting to climate change. That's what I think the progressive movement is about, and I think in the fullness of time, people will say it was right.
For 100 years, American liberals had been lusting to create a truly nationalized health care system.
Charles Kessler is the author of a book on President Obama and his place in the progressive movement.
Under Lyndon Johnson, they created Medicare and Medicaid, but that was far from being universal health coverage. When Bill Clinton failed, liberals and conservatives both thought that this was it. We had seen the high watermark of liberalism, but lo and behold, along comes Barack Obama and does the thing which had seemed impossible. This was their holy grail.
Their entire identity is wrapped up in the success of this law.
Conservative columnist George Will.
For a century, progressivism has said, we will have progress, bliss, and paradise, if, but only if, we concentrate more and more power in the hands of all-seeing, super-competent experts who can do things normal Americans can't do. So that's what progressivism is.
That's the tragedy of this, as a person who supports progressive government.
But Kirsten Powers says the problem is in the execution of Obamacare, not the idea behind it.
It really feeds into the conservative argument that the government's just dysfunctional, that they can't handle anything, that they'll just screw up anything that they touch.
Obamacare is a turning point against big government. Young people are hearing about this law, they're feeling its effects firsthand, and they are running away from big government as fast as they can.
If that's true, and some polls suggest it is, that would seem to be a stunning turnabout for the White House and this president, twice elected with the overwhelming support of millennials. And we will hear more from them later. But how did the Obama breakdown begin? It's a story Fox News reporting cameras watched unfold throughout the year in cities and towns around the country, as well as in the nation's capital, where politicians had to swallow some tough medicine. Our investigation continues when we return. In a Fox News poll taken at the beginning of 2013, 83% of Americans said government spending was out of control. One attempt to stem the red ink was the sequester, a sort of parliamentary doomsday machine no sane lawmaker would dare set in motion. That was the theory. Would it hold?
Do you actually see anything changing until we do hit some kind of government collapse?
I hope not.
January 31st, Butts County, Georgia.
I believe in the Constitution as our founding fathers meant it.
That's Congressman Paul Brown. President Obama had Republicans like him in mind when he proposed the sequester back in 2011.
If we went back to the original intent of the Constitution, we wouldn't have a debt ceiling problem.
People need to remember with the sequester is how it came about, and that was over a fight over the debt ceiling.
A fight Andrew McCarthy of the National Review says was picked by Tea Party Republicans like Brown.
A lot of the professional politicians of both parties said, oh, they're crazy, they're going to cause us to default, they're going to throw the world economy into chaos. But eventually, they forced a deal with the sequester on an unwilling Washington.
The deal was this. If Republicans and Democrats could not cut $1.2 trillion out of the growth of spending over 10 years, automatic cuts would kick in. Half would come from domestic spending, half from defense.
We're not doing it.
That's why Brown was torn over the sequester last winter. He desperately wants to downsize the government, except for the Pentagon.
We need to make targeted cuts, but we need to have a strong national defense. We need to spend more money on the military.
The White House's calculation was that Republicans would not be able to tolerate the sequester because of its impact on the defense budget.
But former Clinton advisor William Galston says the sequester revealed something few in Washington expected.
It's turned out to be an X-ray of changes inside the Republican Party, where the automatic reflex of being pro-defense has been at least overlaid with an equally important impulse towards smaller government.
It would take months for that X-ray image to fully develop.
I think both parties have a sense that this would be a negative event for the economy.
Remember Maryland Congressman John Delaney? Well, on February 12th, he headed to his first State of the Union address.
I don't think a sequester is going to happen.
Defense cuts were supposed to be a poison pill for Republicans. They were never going to swallow it back in the conventional wisdom of the past.
The President of the United States.
Democrats, Republicans, business leaders, and economists have already said that these cuts, known here in Washington as the sequester, are a really bad idea.
True, but they disagree on how to avoid them. Republicans want entitlement reform. The president asks for higher taxes and new spending programs.
I'm announcing the launch of 3 more of these manufacturing hubs. Use some of our oil and gas revenues to fund an energy security trust. Put people to work as soon as possible on our most urgent repairs. Make high-quality preschool available to every single child in America. Redesign America's high schools so they better equip graduates.
Higher taxes on job producers, more spending. It's going to continue to destroy jobs.
Last winter, our cameras followed you through the showdown, the sequester showdown. And one telling moment was after the State of the Union. Was that speech a turning point that some Republicans said, he's not hearing us, this thing's going to kick in?
The president's not hearing the American people. They want spending cuts, and they see that as the only mechanism where spending cuts are actually taking place.
Turns out the Republicans almost like the poison. It was clearly a blunder by the president. It was just a complete misreading of the opposition.
It will eviscerate job-creating investments in education and energy and medical research.
The president tried to convince the public that the sequester cuts would be too painful to bear.
Border Patrol agents will see their hours reduced. FBI agents will be furloughed. Federal prosecutors will have to close cases and let criminals go.
The president went into full Chicken Little mode. The sky is falling, he said. In fact, he said planes are going to fall out of the sky.
Air traffic controllers and airport security will see cutbacks, which means more delays at airports across the country. Thousands of teachers and educators will be laid off.
The problem is only a minority of Americans fear the cuts. More think they'll have a positive effect or make no difference at all. More ominous, perhaps, for the president, nearly half the country thought he deliberately exaggerated the effects of those cuts to try to scare people. And so, on March 1st, a unified Republican caucus lets the sequester cuts go into effect.
Were Democrats surprised that they actually did?
I think each side was surprised. The Democrats thought the Republicans would be so upset about the defense cut they'd never let it happen, and the Republicans thought that the Democrats would be so concerned about cuts to education and things like that that they'd never let it happen.
And here it did.
And here it did.
The sequester cuts only a small percentage of increases in federal spending, but that was still a huge accomplishment for small government conservatives. Then, December 10th, Democrat and Republican negotiators agree to set aside the sequester and increase spending. Though they say their deal reduces the deficit, Tea Party groups howl. Speaker John Boehner bites back.
Frankly, I just think that they've lost all credibility.
December 12th, the House passes the bill, but 62 Republicans vote no, including Tea Party conservative Paul Brown.
Does this budget agreement roll back what Republicans say they accomplished with the sequester?
Absolutely, there's no question. We've got to stop spending, and we've got to do it today, because that's the only way to stop this federal government that's out of control.
Months ago, few predicted that the GOP would agree to ease the sequester, but that was before an ill-fated Tea Party power play that began in earnest last summer.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Coming up, the limits of leverage inside the long shot fight to defund Obamacare.